Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Jefferson Loveday from RM Assessment. Really great to see you all here, and I'll be your MC piloting us through for the remainder of the day. I am a former geography teacher, so if this had been invented when I was at the chalk face, I would have been very grateful, but sadly it wasn't invented. But I'm going to welcome to the stage for our next session. Let me just control this. We're going to be exploring the value of original content. So if I can please welcome to the stage, we have got Nick Hope, who is an innovation manager at RM, currently working on RM Echo, a new originality detection tool. We also have Mark House. Mark is the product manager for RM Compare, a phenomenal adaptive comparative judgment tool which enables educators to actually measure what they treasure rather than just treasuring what they can actually measure. It's a really innovative tool and one I've got heavily involved in since being at RM. I would also like to welcome to the stage Hayden. Hayden is the head of qualifications and delivery at ISEB, the Independent Schools Examination Board, where he oversees the design, development and delivery of assessments for all of ISEB qualifications. He works closely with schools, exam setters and families to ensure ISEB's qualifications are high quality, fair and fit for the needs of today's learners. So I will promptly get off stage and welcome our speakers now. Thank you. I didn't need...
Cool. All right.
Can you all hear us? Yeah? You can hear us? Okay.
All right.
It's like a really terrible boy band, doesn't it? But boy band from hell.
We need the high stools, don't we? So we can, yeah. So.
Okay.
So, I mean, thank you for indulging us for the next 30 minutes or so. I was going to start off with introductions, but James, you've done a fantastic job. Thank you very much. So I'll start off with this instead. So who's seen this painting before? It's very famous. Okay, The Fighting Temeraire, or its full title, The Fighting Temeraire Tugged to Her Last Berth to be Broken Up. Painted in 1838 by William Turner, hangs in the National Gallery. And I thought it was a nice place to start because it's a very poignant image, loaded with metaphor, of course. We have the new technology in the form of a tugboat towing away the old technology because it's now obsolete, even though it was obviously made famous in the Battle of Trafalgar. So I'm a big fan of this painting, and I thought, yeah, this makes me think of something else. And in 2023, the Ford Fiesta, you thought you knew where I was going with this, didn't you? The Ford Fiesta was discontinued in a very similar way. You know, it's the old being replaced by the new. And I thought, could I commemorate this some way, you know, in the way that Turner did, using AI? There's a lot that I could say about this. Obviously, the Fighting Fiesta. Yeah, I'm sorry? It was a whole burger. Yeah, I'm really sorry. Now, obviously I used Gemini for this, and no matter how hard I tried, the Fiesta is pulling the tugboat. I don't know why. I just couldn't tell you. But on a more serious, if you can be serious about this, on a more serious note, it gets you questioning, doesn't it? Is this as poignant? Does this have the same sort of value? And would we hang this in a gallery? I mean, you know, maybe in 100 years, that's exactly what we'll be doing. I don't know. But this is what we're going to talk about over the next sort of 30 minutes or so. This idea of original content. What do we mean by original content? And do we value original content more than we do unoriginal and perhaps AI-generated content? So I'll start with Hayden. Hayden, what do you think? Do we value original content enough?
It's interesting because from an example perspective, we're fairly biased in that we tell all of our schools we want independent thinkers, we want students that are critical thinkers, but then have them tested to a very strict rubric where they have to remember dates, they have to remember calculations, and they're not really applying thought to the work that they're doing. So, apologies. So, yeah, I think the value of originality at the moment, schools are saying, we're original. We tell our pupils to be original. We want them thinking in a different way. We want them to stand out. But then they get to GCSE and A-level, and they're on such a narrow track to perform exactly the same as every other student and almost work to that rubric in order to get the scores, that their originality gets stifled. We work a lot with prep schools and primary schools, and I think increasingly now the value of originality is starting to grow. And that's some of the things we're working on at the moment, and we'll talk a little bit about as we go on.
Yeah, Mark, do you have any thoughts?
Do I have any thoughts? Lots of thoughts. I think one of the things I'm very interested in is the way that value is changing at the moment, and about things that were very valuable in the days when I was growing up, that we were teaching children, which is many years ago, and perhaps what will be valuable in the future is changing. So the actual value of what we want to get from our learners and how we want to assess them is changing quite a bit. I sometimes look at in the wider market about which is value, and one of the things I'm really interested in is value of companies, believe it or not, and I was particularly interested in the value of Reddit. Anybody gone Reddit? Okay, Reddit's like a scary place, but it's really interesting. And it's very valuable. It's getting increasingly valuable because it's full of really wild human-generated content. All right, it's full of just crazies writing crazy stuff. All right, but if you take it from a purely business perspective, it's really valuable. All right, if you did dollars and dimes, it's valuable. Right, the stuff is valuable inside it. If you go and visit some other stuff where they're much more reliant on AI-generated content for their content, actually the value is less. Okay, so there's something going on here where there's a change in value, which I find interesting. I don't think you could go to Reddit and say it's not original. You go to original and think, whoa, really? Okay, it's just really original, right? So there's something there that we're thinking about. Anyway, that's what I think.
I think it's interesting you mentioned Reddit. I think I'm right in saying that Reddit is used to train LLMs as well, right? So when I think about the value of original content, actually that's really, really imperative, right? Because if you're training LLMs on unoriginal content or even AI-generated content, you end up in this sort of cyclical kind of context, right? But right, on your tables, you should find some green paper and some red paper. So we're just going to test this. Hold up the green card if you enjoy audience participation. And hold up the red card if you don't.
You got to do it now.
You got to do it now.
There's a red at the back.
There's a red.
What's going on?
There's a red. Okay. Ooh. We've got a few reds. Okay. It's a good mix. And to that, my response is tough. So let's use these cards. Do you think that original content is more valuable to us than unoriginal content? So if you think it's more valuable, let's see green. If you think, no, actually, unoriginal content's fine. Okay, green. And a red at the back. Okay. Now, it's not time for Q&A, but what are your thoughts? I think you were the only red card in the room.
Echoing some of the comments earlier on,
Right.
I know very little about it.
Yeah, okay.
So if you're talking about assessment, there's an argument that would say items that have been thoroughly tested, retested, have a greater value than those that would.
It's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? And to sort of to the point that Hayden was making as well, when you look at conventions are in place and conventions are well proven, how original do you want students to be in some subjects? Certainly, it's a good question. Yeah, really good point. And one of the things that certainly when we've talked about this idea of originality and value, it got us thinking, and maybe to that same point about subject specific, the difference between divergent and convergent thinking. Now, I work in innovation, and this is a really big thing for us because we have to do both. We have to be very divergent when we're thinking about, how to solve a problem, or, what is the problem that needs to be solved. But also we have to be quite convergent in our thinking as well, because, well, okay, what is the problem and what are we going to get on and build? Now, I think this is interesting. I want to sort of come to Hayden again on this. In that context of education and specifically assessment, how much divergent thinking are you seeing at the moment?
Well, yeah, to follow on your point there, by the time students are reaching those levels at GCSE, A-level, trying to get into university, they're encouraged to think convergently. They're rewarded for the single correct answer, whether it's essay form or multiple choice. Students have to give the right answer to be able to express themselves. And I think what's quite interesting is that there's more and more studies coming from university graduates leaving or going into the workplace, and educators are focusing on the 12 skills that they're aiming for when students are leaving. The ones they value the most are the opposite of what workplaces are looking for. So students are coming into the workplace completely unprepared because they think there's a single correct answer always, and there's often not. So that lack of divergent thinking at an earlier age is really stifling graduates in the workplace. So a lot of the early learners now are encouraging project-based learning or inquiry-based learning, more independence of thought, and allowing students to run free with their own project titles or definitions about something they're passionate about, that there's not a singular correct answer. It lets them express themselves in a different way. It's all about using the information that's available to them, and in a world of AI, they've got everything at their fingertips. It's much less valuable to be able to remember dates. It's much more important to understand the correlation between events that happened on those dates. And that's a bit that allows pupils to express themselves in a way that AI can't. And I think there is a shift in education slowly, but whilst assessment still rewards convergent thinking, it's going to take time.
Yeah, I think so. I know it's interesting to hear Dan, who opened for us today, when he said, you'd be quite worried if you went to your boss and said, I've been working away and this is the answer. And he says, yes, you're right. And actually we've got that here, the single correct answer is a product of convergent thinking, but, is that going to be the case moving forward? Perhaps not. But I'm going to move on to something that if anybody saw us earlier in the year, we were talking about this, and Hayden obviously knows a lot about this, is the Time to Write competition that was run by, and is run every year, I think, right, by ISEB. Right. And we've done a bit of work with ISEB and RM on this. So Hayden, could you just tell us, what is the Time to Write competition about? What were you looking for?
Yeah, sure. So Time to Write is a step towards that encouragement of independent, creative, wacky thinking. Essentially, we give students a topic. You've all heard how creative writing competitions work traditionally. A topic is given and students are able to go off and write anything they want about it. Last year we had the theme light, but what makes this different is that we use comparative judgment to moderate. So we had nearly 3,000 entries last year. We used comparative judgment, which I'm sure Mark will explain in a second, to narrow down to the top 10, and then we had a pool of judges from heads of English departments, children's authors, experts in the field to narrow down the top 10 into our winners who received these brilliant books. But by using comparative judgment, well, Mark, do you want to go rather than me take your bit?
I was a teacher forever, all right, so I sometimes talk about this a bit, but I guess what you were looking for is you didn't know what the kids were going to write about, and that's great. You gave them a very basic title, write about light, and I think the interesting thing about you as well, Hayden, is that you're an international organisation, right?
Yeah.
So we were really interested to see, well, how would children in Southeast Asia respond to this as to people in Europe? All right, we have no idea what the kids are going to write about, no clue, and the kids are kids, right? So they did come up with some really diverse responses. If you'd have tried to assess it with a rubric, it would have been extremely difficult. So they were just so different. They were so sort of wacky, right, to work out what the value of these things were. And that's what we wanted to test, didn't we? We wanted to test whether this would help this sort of creative divergent thinking. I mean, we did have some cases where some of them actually went a bit dark, didn't they? Some of the children wrote about things which were surprising in a bad way, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That we were looking at. But once we got that pool of things, it's like, well, how do we work out what's good and what's not so good? Once you get to that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Certainly. So it was a way, using comparative judgment was a way to whittle down 3,000 projects.
I think you would say that it did the first bit, didn't it? It did encourage children to essentially write what they wanted to write about in their local context.
Yeah.
They could write anything.
Knowing there was freedom to move away from a rubric and let each of their stories be seen by a significant number of judges was so empowering. And we hear that when we speak to schools and parents and the feedback from the children themselves. It's so good for them to know how many people were reading their work, and it gave them a real sense of empowerment and freedom to write openly, which is not something that necessarily happens in school, where you get marked out of 8 for your vocabulary and there's buzzwords that push you up into that upper bracket.
And from our point of view as well, we just sort of approached this that we don't know, right? So we were really interested in getting 3,000 entries. So how could we get 3,000 to see what we could learn from this? Right? And that in itself was just a useful way of for an awarding organisation to bottom out what they were thinking. It's low stakes, let's work it out. Are we seeing the right sort of thing? And I thought it was really clever. What's really nice about these books, though, is that the books at the end are the winners. So what the awarding body was able to do was to send a packet of the books back to all the schools that entered, that went into their library. So what you're showing them then is essentially what good looks like.
Yeah.
Right. So that they were also getting something back, and I really like the fact that the book was actually a physical book. It was a tangible book that the children could actually touch. Okay. I think that was really, so you had this digital thing going on, but we still want to help the children understand a book itself. A book is valuable, which I think is good, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So you used adaptive comparative judgment in RM Compare, but there was another element to this as well, and this is where we start thinking about AI. This is an AI summit, if you didn't know. So we introduced some AI, what would we call them, seeds, decoys, something like that. Hayden, do you want to just talk us through kind of that approach, what you did there?
Yeah, so certainly. So Mark, Nick and myself had a lot of conversations as the process of setting up the creative writing competition was going on. And we were trying to understand, what do our judges value? Is it originality? Are the most original going to be in that top 10, that top 50? Or is it going to be something that's a bit more rubric focused, because the teachers that we're judging still have that in their mind? And in an effort to understand where AI fits in this, we seeded in each of the 4 categories, each of the 4 age groups, we seeded 6 different AI stories, 2 by Gemini, 2 by DeepSeek, and 2 by ChatGPT, just to see how they perform. And we encouraged each of our judges, I believe there was over 150 judges, to flag anything that they thought was AI. So it's a really interesting test to see, do teachers know what AI is, and where does this originality lie?
Yeah. And I'm just going to sort of show you, if you haven't seen RM Compare and what that looks like, Mark's talked a little bit about how that works. Mark, do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that?
I think it's that.
It's that, yeah.
You see a pair of things on the screen, and you can ask any question you want, but what you're trying to just say ultimately is, do you like the one on the left better than the one on the right? Okay?
Yeah.
And there's other things you can do. You can ask the judge, for example, to say why they think the one is better than the one on the right. And I think what you asked them to do is say, if you think it's AI, say, I think this is AI.
Yeah.
So we could work out whether or not how good they were at it, at doing this type of thing.
And that's exactly what we did, right?
Yeah.
Mark, what did the results tell us?
Yeah, so when you run a comparative judgment session at the end, and these are charts from early in the session, right? But you're going to get some items that win all their competitions and some that lose them all, and you're going to get some that will win some and some which will lose some. All right, and by doing that, you get this rank order. okay, of it. So to the left here, if you go right to the far left, they would be the best, what we'd call the highest value items, in the sense that the judges said they are the best. And the ones to the right are the ones you'd say are the ones are the weakest. And then we get everything in between, okay, down here. And there's quite a bit to this, but the basic principle is pretty straightforward. And what I've highlighted on there for you is just where the AI scripts fell, okay, which in itself is quite interesting when we start to look at it, right? Because that I haven't put on here, I've made a mistake, I haven't put what age groups they were, because the AI scripts perform slightly different based on age group, okay, where they actually fell, okay, but you can also see that some of the AIs did better than the others, okay, some were just better. When I say better, they produced, according to the human beings, higher value stuff than the other guys did, okay, is what we saw in there, okay. So this type of stuff is, this is the type of stuff where we go back to Hayden, and this is about, so what do we think? A lot of the times it isn't, and the answer is this. It's, oh, that's interesting. What does that mean? What are we going to do? Okay, and this is where these type of things I think are hugely interesting and hugely valuable, if you can do it at scale. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things we did is we took all of these items and we put them through RM Echo. Now, this is my shameless plug, okay? I'm not going to apologize. I'm the product manager for RM Echo. It's going into public beta today. You can get free access to it. So come and have a chat with me, or we've got Ed. Ed, give us a wave. Pal, give us a wave. Come and have a chat with us and come and have a look. But what we did, we took all of these items, all of these nearly 3,000 entries, and the AI decoys, for want of a better word, and we put them into RM Echo. Now, what Echo allows you to do is put a large amount of content in and compare items to see how similar they are. And you can see here, it's sort of, I think it still looks like that. We're moving fast, but it still looks like that. And this is essentially the approach we took. So the first thing we did is we compared every entry from students with every other entry from students, and that's across all of the age categories. We put them all in together. And then we compared each one of those with 50, so the ones that Hayden added, plus some more, 50 AI-generated stories on the same theme of light. That's essentially sort of the basis, if you like, for then what we learnt next. So the overall similarity was actually very low. In terms of percentage, they weren't very similar, which is good. But we did see some common phraseology, some common use of metaphors that came through. So the one on the left here, which was from one of the AI-generated seeds, there was this phrase, the voice that echoed in his mind. And in some of the student entries, we can see there variations on a theme, but not dissimilar. And this got me thinking, well, why use that particular metaphor? Why that phrase? Why not the words that echoed in his brain, or whatever it may be? Perhaps not quite as poetic. But is this the students, repeating what they hear? Is the AI clearly generated based on human content? So how much homogenization might we expect to see over time? The other one, this is my favorite, the testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. It's quite hard to sort of stumble into that phrase, isn't it? But we saw that in two different age categories. Neither of those examples was from an AI seed that we'd put in there. One of them was suspected by judges as being AI. But I thought this is quite interesting. Again, you don't just stumble into this. So how much of this sort of phraseology, how many of these metaphors are we going to see? Did anything surprise you on this, guys, before we move on?
I used to teach in international schools, and anytime a student started to learn towards IELTS, they would always pick up very similar idioms and try and throw them into every sentence. It was always raining cats and dogs, for example.
Yes, exactly.
So students, especially sort of academically able students, will pick up phrases that make them sound intelligent and cling on to them. And it's really interesting now that we've got Echo to highlight some of these phrases and what students think are clever that might come across to an adult as AI, but it's what a student actually has heard somewhere or copied. It might have been from a TV program or a book they've read.
Yeah.
But they know if they throw that in, perhaps artificially and it unwarranted, that makes them sound intelligent nonetheless. So
Yeah.
I think the use of Echo year on year with Time to Write will be really powerful for us to be able to understand what students value and how original those
Yes.
books are.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an interesting. I was talking to Vicky. Where's Vicky? There's Vicky. We got into quite an existential chat earlier, didn't we? About is originality even possible? Hasn't everything been done before? But it's an interesting one, isn't it? At some point, perhaps we reach saturation. I don't know. But Mark, what do you think?
This interests me. I mean, there's been some good articles recently about coffee shops, believe it or not. Okay, it doesn't matter where you go in the world at the moment, all the coffee shops look the same. Okay, you can go wherever you want. You know, you can go any part of the world, you walk into it, and it's a business model because apparently everybody feels comfortable and drinks more coffee. But they all look the same. Right? They've been homogenized effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think one of the things we're interested in here to see is are we starting to see any evidence of this happening in student responses? Okay, is the AI going to basically reward people basically saying the same thing? Okay, are they roughly going to talk in roughly the same phraseology? Are they going to use roughly the same language? Because that's what's going to be rewarded by the models. Okay, effectively, you know. But so if a kid, for example, wrote a story, and it was so wacky and so out there, so completely different, did the judges think that was good or bad? All right, or did they reward things which were basically the same as everybody else? Yeah, so they're the type of things I think this sort of brings out as a matter of interest. And I think to awarding organisations, I like to think this is really interesting, right? To understand about what we're trying to achieve here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was particularly interested in whether the judges would spot the AI seeds as well.
Yeah.
So some thoughts on that. So 1.7% of what the judges were looking at were AI. I keep saying decoys. There's got to be a better word than that. But anyway, the AI stories that were planted by us, known by us to be generated by AI. So you'll be really pleased to know you get to use your green and red paper again. So what percentage did judges suspect as being AI? If you think it was more than 1.7%, hold up your green card. If you think it was less, hold up the red card. Okay. Quite unanimous. One outlier here. A few outliers. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's get ready to go again. Do you think the judges suspected more than 10% as being AI generated? Green if you think it was more than 10. Red if you think it was less than 10%. Bit more of a split. Oh, that's very close, isn't it? Almost 50-50. Okay. Interesting. Let me tell you the answer. 3.1, nearly double. So this is what human judges had suspected as being either completely generated by AI or partially. But none of the ones that they suspected were the AI stories that we had put in there, right? Which is a little bit mind-blowing. I mean, did that surprise you, Hayden?
Yes. Yeah, because we had stories flagged for all sorts of reasons, but we hadn't particularly tried to trick with these decoys. The prompt was very simply, I would like you to write a story as if you are an age 7 child age 7 about the theme light. We didn't try and flush it through a few times or try and trick or anything like that. They were very generic, just you're this age, write a story. So yeah, the fact that none of them were caught is quite surprising. I believe that, so this was finished back in March, April time last year. I think if it was to be done again, the ChatGPT ones would get caught a lot more often because of their use of M dashes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it would be really interesting to see it again. But like the long dash they put at the end of a clause that ChatGPT uses a lot. If you notice, if one of your colleagues' emails starts having a lot of dashes, It's probably AI. Yeah, I've had to stop using them because I've seen this and I'm worried. But yeah, it was really interesting. None of those were caught. Now, we have no way of knowing if some of the students were submitting AI stories. There were the ones we suspected that were removed from the pool. But yeah, the fact none of ours were is quite surprising. If you just let me get my notes, I'll be able to tell you the reasons why judges flagged some of them. Continued feedback was noticed advanced use of grammatical techniques and American spellings. It was an international competition, so we had students from all over the world, so a bit unfair to use American spellings, but in our prompt we put British spellings. It's worth noting that as well. Another one, high level of language and spelling accuracy for the age group. So our high-level learners being punished because they've got that high level of language, and this is
too
something
good.
Echo
Yes,
will be able to really support us with in the future. The formatting the first and last lines of the story. For example, the inclusion of the moral of the story at the end. I thought that was surprising because most children's stories have a moral at the end, but that was feedback. Suspiciously perfect phrasing, pacing, and use of large dashes. They missed the ChatGPT ones though, and then one person believed they'd seen the story before. But I'd argue that would stop it being AI probably.
Well, one thing that I've been interested in lately is I write a blog, right? I write a blog for Compare, and traditionally the way you surface things on a blog is you really focus on search engine optimization. All right, so you work really hard on see if you can get this thing to come up in search. But I'm much more interested now in answer engine optimization, okay, which is where effectively you ask a question into an LLM, and do you see the content what you've written about in your blog coming up in the answer? Okay, that's the key thing. All right, okay. If you HubSpot have a free one of these you can use, which is really, really interesting. Okay, if you put it in, but the worrying thing is a little bit, of course, is that if you're trying to optimize, what it's forcing you to do is writing in a style that AI engine wants you to write in.
Yeah.
So I want to write in like an original way, but if I write in an original way, the LLM won't surface it. Okay, and as we saw earlier, not only that is you'd probably have to write 3 versions of the blog because AI will value things differently to Gemini and something else. And if you go to most companies now, they will have a whole team of people who are optimizing for the engine. Okay, coming the other way. And again, this comes back to my coffee shop thing again, because what it's doing is forcing everybody to basically write the same. Okay, at the other end. Yeah, and I think this comes back to this originality thing, which fascinates me at the moment. Yeah.
And I'm chuckling a little bit. I spoke to a group of students yesterday afternoon, and they said they're friends of my daughter, and they said, so what are you doing in London tomorrow? I said, I'm talking about this. I'm talking about RM Echo. That's a brand new product that's gone. Sorry. And I was explaining what it was, and they said, they started talking about use of AI, and then one of them said, yeah, but she leaves all the long dashes in hers, so we all know. So they're getting wise to it. They're getting wise to it. But it's also interesting, Hayden. One of your some of the feedback that you were reading there was from the judges saying this is not. I think if I heard correctly, this is not the sort of work I'd expect to see from this student, which I think speaks to something we heard earlier about that assessment is part of it, at least, is the relationship between teacher or assessor and learner, so that you can form a human judgment that will at the very least be augmented by AI perhaps, but you could never perhaps replace it for that reason. But,
yeah, and those judgment calls are perhaps a little bit unfair, but it depends on that person's individual experience. So I suppose AI would help with that by feeding large amounts of data into it. You'd be able to understand what is an appropriate level for each child and what is those upper ceiling. It's much better than a teacher, even with years and years of experience, probably would.
Yeah. I'm going to just got a couple of things I wanted to sort of finish with, really, as the embers are getting low in our Fireside. There is no Fireside. Did anyone else notice that? Anyway, one of the things that we've talked about, in and amongst this, and again, we've heard this a little bit throughout the day, is this connection between what we teach, how we teach, and how we assess, and that these things are they sort of work together. Mark, do you want to sort of share your thoughts on this? I know this is something we've talked about quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we sometimes talk about assessment of learning, for learning, and as learning. And I see those things sort of merging together a little bit more perhaps at the moment. I think endpoint assessments are, obviously a lot of you guys in the room are the main thing. Okay, endpoint assessments are it. Okay, but the journey for the student leading up to there is actually a mixture of all sorts of different assessment to get to that point. All right, and clearly, on their way up, the way that the curriculum and the pedagogy interacts, you can't separate it from the assessment. It's sort of all in there together, right? Okay, so at that end point, it's not there because you're sitting the test. And we heard from Dan this morning about, he was saying about his 5-year-old son, I think, or whatever, the idea that they'd still be sitting in an exam hall further out. Okay, I think this sort of merging between these three things and the role of exam boards in those other two areas. Okay, do they have people in their organisation that at least have some understanding of the other areas? And I'm sure you all do. Okay, I think that's going to become more and more important, I think. Okay.
Yeah, Dan talked, didn't he, about everyone's waiting, educators are waiting for assessors to move first, and I think here there's probably that third element as well, that actually the practitioners are also in that mix. But Hayden, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd argue that good assessment is based on the curriculum, i.e. the curriculum should come first, the way the content taught and the assessment derives from that. I would also argue that's not the case way too often. I'd say the assessment is too often at the forefront and the curriculum is built to beat the assessment. And I think it sounds like that's what your colleague was referring to. I don't know how much longer it will be like that. I think there is a massive call for a shift in those sorts of assessment and the focus on the curriculum and the way students learn, moving away from that convergent thinking to moving away from convergent
towards a more diverse. Yeah, absolutely.
Gentlemen, sorry to interrupt you, but we are running out of time, and I'm conscious not to derail your talk, but to give the audience a chance to ask you questions.
James, that's exactly where I was going.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for that. I'll put this on. This is where we started. Just have that in mind. How long have we got? A couple of minutes? Or?
We've got 2 minutes, gents.
2 minutes. That's time for a question, at least, if there are any. Yes. Have we got a...
I could shout. You said 1.7% of the scripts were seen.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had this thought, but 3.6% identified as being AI by the judges. How many do you think were actually written by AI and submitted by the students?
That is a good question, and that's not me evading it. RM Echo, it's a new product. One of the things we're going to be looking at next on the roadmap there is about the likelihood of AI having been used. So the next thing we're going to do is to take the ones that the judges had suspected and use that as part of our test data, if you like, to say, well, does our technology also think that? But I had a look through them personally. Some of them I would agree with, some of them I wouldn't. Similar to what Hayden was saying, actually, some of the reasons were spurious in my opinion, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult to know.
I think from a summary point that I've heard all day today is that we need to move from a position where we treasure what we can measure, and we need to think much harder, how do we measure what we treasure? Because the things we're treasuring are changing. The things which are valuable are changing, okay? And we're going to have to, as a group of people, and it's going to be these people in this room that work it out, all right? Okay, how do we measure those things? Yeah? Okay, if we agree the first premise is true, that new things are becoming more valuable, how do we measure those? I mean, hopefully you can see today that we tend to progress with high levels of humility, okay? We know what we know, and we like working with people who also understand that this is not easy to do. All right, so if you're interested, these are the type of things that we just an example, we get. And Hayden, do you find this valuable?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
Is it original?
It really brings meaning to a lot of the
Yeah.
more creative assessments that we're working on at the moment, both this and a project qualification that we run.
Yeah.
I think our fire has
We've got time for one more question.
Hi there.
fire still burning. Yes.
Lots of really interesting and fun things. When you talk about divergent thinking and convergent thinking,
Yeah.
isn't there a danger that, say, conspiracy theories are quite divergent? So do we need evaluation in the middle of that?
I think so, yeah. And I think, obviously, when we talk about divergent and convergent thinking within the realms of education and assessment, I think nuance is everything. And I think, to your point as well earlier, I think context is key.
Yeah.
Do we want a lot of divergent thinking in mathematics? Well, maybe some, but
Yes,
well, yes, maybe, yes, maybe we do. But some subjects perhaps more applicable than others.
Thank
I
you.
think our fire has gone out.
That the fire has dissipated, but can we have a round of applause for our panel, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, gentlemen. Well done. It's great. Really good. Well done, Nick.